I used to write my name carefully, looping the Y so it curled beneath the line. No flourishes, just neatness. A habit from school forms and birthday cards. A name meant permanence, I suppose. That belief didn't last. The envelope came from the county office. I didn't open it right away. It sat beneath a stack of grocery ads and a magazine I never subscribed to. When I finally slid my finger under the seal, it made a sound like something splitting. Inside, a notice of title reassignment. Property transfer. 203 Glenview Drive, new registered owner, Mr. Brian Sanford. There was no mention of me. At first, I checked the date. Maybe it was old? Misrouted? Clerical? Then I saw the line typed in small letters near the bottom power of attorney signed on file. Process completed by third-party legal rep. I didn't remember signing anything. I didn't remember agreeing to hand over the house I had scrubbed after stomach flus painted after storms, and once repaired myself with duct tape when the screen door unhinged. The phone rang that same afternoon. I didn't need to look at the caller ID. His timing had always been too clean. "You got the letter," he said. No greeting. "Your name's still on the insurance for now, but legally it's just easier this way. Consolidated. Simple." "You sold the house," I answered, not really asking. "And the car," he added, as if reading a grocery list. "You don't drive enough to justify the upkeep. Tracy and I thought Silver Pines would be more supportive." Silver Pines. It sounded like a scented candle. He continued, "They're expecting you Monday. Private room window facing west. Don't worry, we packed some things you'll need. You packed well, Tracy did. Essentials. The rest will handle the donation." I don't remember hanging up. The sound cut, and then I was alone in the kitchen, holding a letter that no longer had my name on it. Only the address remained. I opened the cabinet above the sink where I kept documents. In the back, behind tax folders and warranty slips, was a beige file creased at the edges. Inside it, the original deed. James Sanford and Cheryl Sanford. Joint ownership signed in pen, not digitally. His handwriting curved like mine. There was a stain near the bottom corner from where James once set down his coffee mug, unaware the document had been spread across the table. He apologized for it at the time, even laughed, said it gave it character. I had never cleaned it. At dinner once, when I forgot to pour water for myself, Brian said, "See, this is what we're talking about." Little slips. He didn't mean it unkindly. He never does. He says it like fact. "Don't bother coming Saturday." Tracy had texted earlier that week regarding the family gathering. "It's mostly for the younger crowd. We thought you might be tired." "No, can you make it?" "No, we'll save you a seat." Just a line of closure, soft as wool. I used to bring pies to those things. Rhubarb apple, once even cherry, when I knew Tracy disliked the seeds. They would sit untouched on the dessert table while the store-bought cheesecake disappeared first. Last year, Brian asked me not to drive in for Thanksgiving. "You know it's complicated with parking, and Sadie's got allergies now. The candles you use, those might trigger something." He never mentioned which candles. That Thanksgiving, I reheated stuffing and watched game shows until 9. Now, apparently, I didn't own a house or a car, or even the right to ask why. I unfolded the deed again. There it was, our names. His first, mine second. That had always been the order. James would smile and say, "Ladies last, but always closest to the signature line." I took out a red pen from the drawer. It had rolled under the receipts and a rubber band. I drew a straight line beneath our names, not a strike-through, just a line. Then I wrote 3 words in the margin, quiet as breath. I remember everything. Not out loud, just on paper. I didn't call anyone. There was no one to call. Lena would have picked up, but she would ask questions, kind ones. I wasn't ready to answer any of them. Not yet. On the fridge door, my magnet with the cracked ceramic tulip still held a photo of Sadie from kindergarten. Her smile had all her teeth. That was before Tracy started signing her holiday cards from the Sanfords without listing names. There was a bruise on the linoleum floor where I dropped a pot months ago. I had meant to scrub it out, but now it didn't matter. The floor wouldn't be mine next week. In the drawer by the stove, I found the small box that used to hold the checks James and I shared. We always signed in the same spot. I ran my thumb over the last blank check, still showing both our names. Not valid anymore. Just paper now. I didn't cry. That wasn't the shape of it. I folded the deed in thirds, careful not to smudge the ink. I placed it in a new folder, labeled it by hand. Not for them, for me. There are ways people erase you, sometimes with silence, sometimes with pens. I didn't leave the kitchen, I didn't go outside, I didn't pack. I stood there for a long while, letting the refrigerator hum fill the space, letting the late afternoon light dull the corners of the countertop. I listened to the silence that comes when your name no longer belongs to anything but memory. And then I made a quiet choice. I would not disappear. Not here. Not like this. Trust, I've learned, is sometimes handed over wrapped in ribbon and returned folded with corners missing. I once gave Tracy a copy of the house key. She tucked it into her purse, nodded without looking up, and said it was good to have a backup. A week later, I stood on the porch with grocery bags cutting into my fingers. The lock blinked red. They'd installed a smart entry system while I was at the dentist. When I called from the sidewalk, she answered on speaker. "Oh, didn't Brian tell you we upgraded? More secure. You know how older folks sometimes forget doors." I nodded, though no one could see me. The paper bag split open at the bottom, and 2 apples rolled down the steps. Last Christmas, I baked 18 walnut bars from Owen's old recipe, the one I found in the back of his college journal scribbled in block letters. I wrapped them in parchment and tied them with red string. Brian took one look, tilted the lid back with a frown. "You made these dangerous choice. Sadie has a nut allergy now. You didn't know no one touched them." I dropped the box into the kitchen trash on my way out. The string stayed on. At Lena's celebration in the botanical gardens last spring, I brought 3 roses from my own yard, trimmed at an angle, tied with a soft ribbon. I found her by the fountain, but Tracy stepped between us with a hand on my elbow. Let Lena shine today. No need for extra gestures. So I kept the roses folded in my coat pocket petals, bruising quietly against the lining. There was a year, perhaps the last, I still counted myself inside their circle, when Brian insisted on filing my taxes. "It's all digital now. I'll just take care of it." Less chance of confusion. He didn't ask for receipts. When I booked a train trip with Helen down to Savannah, I canceled the night before. Lena called that evening, mentioned needing help with Sadie while she interviewed a new sitter. She didn't ask me directly. She paused just long enough that I heard the request not made. I told Helen my back was acting up. It wasn't true. When Lena was in labor with her second, I waited outside the maternity wing for 3 hours. Tracy sent a message at one point. "It's packed in here. Maybe stay out a bit longer." We're trying to keep it calm. I watched a vending machine eat my dollar bill and give me the wrong chips. No one updated me. The nurse finally said they already went home. I folded the blanket I had brought and left it at the front desk. In quiet moments, I touched the edges of my silence like someone pressing a bruise. Never hard, just enough to feel its shape. I don't own many keepsakes. I don't collect. But there's a drawer in the kitchen that still holds the apron Sadie used to pull over her head when she wanted to help with cookies. There's a green stain from when she painted her hands and pressed them on my stomach, laughing. The fabric's thinned now. I run my hand over it some evenings, tracing those stains like ghost fingerprints. Once I tried to explain to Brian why I was worried about the title of the house. He waved me off. "Let the ones who understand the legal side handle things. You focus on resting. Resting. It was always about resting, about stepping back, about making room. When Tracy labeled a drawer in the hallway mementos, Cheryl, I noticed she hadn't written Mom, just Cheryl, in the same handwriting she used for pantry labels and birthday banners. I read every card they gave me. Not one used the word. They called me by my name, not my place. When Sadie won an award at school, I sat in the back row. The seat beside me stayed empty. On stage, she waved at the front, where Brian and Tracy stood. I waved back anyway. She didn't see. Once I took a call while folding towels. It was Tracy asking if I could not bring up the scrapbook at dinner again. It just makes the younger ones feel like they're not part of it. I didn't bring it again. I ironed linen napkins before Sunday meals even when they told me they'd switch to paper. I wore cardigans with pearls sewn into the collar, thinking it looked settled, a word James once used when describing the kind of woman people listened to. I stopped humming in the kitchen when Tracy said it made it hard to focus on emails. I learned to occupy less space, to carry warmth like it was a fragile thing on loan. Tonight, I sit with the lights off. The hallway lamp flickers sometimes, but I know the pattern. My hands rest in my lap, fingers folded apron across my knees. That green smear still faint, still visible. The silence doesn't ask me to perform. It doesn't correct. It lets me remember things fully without being told I've misremembered. I did what I thought they needed. I stepped back. I waited. I softened my voice, erased myself gently, as though quiet could earn a return. But there was no plan to call me back in. No one forgets to say Mom. They choose not to. And now I choose nothing. Just a chair in the dark kitchen, the smell of fabric worn down by time, and tiny hands. I no longer fold myself to fit. I no longer wait at closed doors. They taught me where I stood, and I listened too well. I've never liked pictures of myself, but there was something different about being erased altogether. The photo was framed in silver, sitting on a fold-out easel in the center of the reception table. Tracy's birthday. A new print, blown up, polished, everyone arranged in order, Brian in the middle. Tracy beside him. Lena holding Sadie, even Harold Bryan's old college friend tucked in near the edge, smiling wide. Not me, a young server pointed to the photo as she handed out napkins. That's the Sanfords, right. You're the neighbor, the one with the roses. I didn't answer. She moved on before I had to. I stood there longer than I meant to. The glass had a faint smudge across the top corner right where my head would have been. Not blurred cut. Like someone took the crop tool, drew a box, and decided which part of the frame mattered. 2 weeks before that, Tracy posted a photo of Sadie's birthday party online. The caption read, "She's surrounded by the best family anyone could ask for." I recognized the tablecloth I'd sewn the year they moved in peach gingham, slightly faded from too many washes. I'd lent it to them for the garden setup. Tracy hadn't tagged me. She tagged Lena. Even Sadie's pediatrician. I looked for myself in the background. I had helped with the lemonade handed out paper fans in the heat. No angle included me. I received no printed copy of that party. What I did receive was a card on Christmas morning, one of those thin ones with glitter already flaking at the fold. The tag read, "To Cheryl" in uneven marker half smudged, written with the kind of effort that comes when you're told to write a name you don't remember well. Tracy handed it to me over her shoulder while adjusting the thermostat. "We didn't know what you'd like, so it's a gift card. You can get socks or something." I nodded, slipped it into my coat pocket. Later that evening, I pulled it out and found the receipt still stapled to the back. The total was under $15. The same week, I was invited to an award ceremony. Nothing grand. Just a community recognition from the local library, years of volunteering organizing the Tuesday reading group. Lena came with me. She brought carnations. Brian's message arrived that morning. "Proud. Can't make it. 3 words, 1 period, no explanation. Lena clapped politely during the photos, handed me a tissue when I wiped my glasses. In the group photo taken after she leaned in with a practiced smile. The print now lives in a frame above the bookshelf beside a pressed dahlia I saved years ago from James's memorial. I haven't told them I remember who watered the flowers, or who didn't. That same bookshelf holds another picture, our wedding. James in his gray suit tie slightly off-center. I wore ivory. The veil barely reached my shoulders. He'd written on the back, in pen, slanted and deliberate, with love forever. That day, no one told me I was too much or too quiet. No one moved me out of the frame to center someone else. I was still we. There was a dinner party once years ago, but it stays. I wore navy blue and someone spilled wine. Tracy gestured at the stain. Oh, Cheryl, maybe avoid patterns next time. They're a little loud for someone your age. She didn't say it loudly. That's what made it last. The napkins had gold trim. I remember folding them by hand the night before. There was another moment, small, but it stayed. Sadie was drawing in the living room knees tucked under her. She asked for help spelling sunflower. Before I finished the word, Tracy's voice called from upstairs. Don't confuse her. We're teaching phonics our way now. I handed the marker back without finishing. Sadie didn't look up. I wonder sometimes if these are the things that push a person to silence, not the shouts, but the slow subtraction. Brian once told someone over dinner, loud enough for me to hear, "She's more like a kind aunt than a grandma." You know, practical, not overly sentimental. I refilled the water pitcher and didn't break stride. No one in the room disagreed. In a box near the closet, I keep letters from James' birthday notes, old receipts with scribbles. One envelope holds a grocery list in my handwriting. Milk, lemons, flour, rosemary. Below that, he had written, "You always forget the coffee. I never will." The ink has faded to brown, still legible. Once during a Memorial Day barbecue, I brought a peach pie, hand-rolled crust. Tracy thanked me at the door, then whispered, "Let's just keep it in the back. We don't want anyone to get sick with all the allergies these days." It stayed in the fridge all night. When I went to retrieve the dish the next morning, the pie had been thrown out. My name had been scratched from the foil with a knife. I recognized the dent in the baking tin. I kept the tin, washed it carefully, wrapped it in cloth, and placed it in the cabinet where no one looks. Now, when I look at the large family portrait from that birthday party, the one with all the polished smiles, I try to trace where I would have stood, the edge of the couch next to the vase of lilies. There's an empty space beside the lamp. That's where I had been. That's where they cropped. I don't need the full picture to know where I stood. I once belonged in the frame. Now I live in the margin, and I've stopped waiting to be reattached. I never subscribed to those newsletters. They just started showing up one day. Half-off cleaning bundles, estate auctions, pre-approved refinance offers. I used to delete them in batches. That morning, I opened one. "Congratulations, Brian. Your vehicle sale has been confirmed." There was a photo under the subject line. 2020 Lincoln signature. Silver trim waxed hood. My library bag used to sit in the back seat behind the passenger side. I could still feel the way the seatbelt clicked differently when I drove alone. Estate clearance, the subheading read. Low miles. Verified handover. Another email followed. Luxury ocean cottage sold. Under exclusive power of attorney. A stock photo previewed the listing, shiplap walls, light wood floors, view of the bluff. But the bench wasn't stock. That was our bench James had carved our initials on the underside one summer when the paint was drying too slow. I called. Brian picked up on the third ring. "You sold my car." A pause. "It was just sitting there. I used it every week." "You haven't been driving as much." "And the cottage I had power of attorney." "It was better to offload it before the hurricane season. You didn't ask. You weren't in the position to manage it anymore. It's a relief, honestly. There's a difference between help and replacement. I'm not replacing you. I'm making decisions before they become problems. That wasn't a problem." That was memory. Memory can't pay maintenance. I didn't reply. Not right away. A knock interrupted. I opened the front door to a man in a reflective vest with a clipboard. "You the housekeeper, I'm here for the pre-transfer inspection. Pipes mainly, but we'll check for mold too. Ocean property, you know." He didn't seem confused. He seemed scheduled. I nodded toward the side gate and shut the door. The next week, a spreadsheet came from Tracy titled Final Furniture Dispersal, Pending Sale. Each row listed an item, its condition, and its sale method. Line 17, dining table 8-seater, marked for consignment. That table had a crack in the fourth plank, from when Owen dropped the casserole dish the first Thanksgiving after college. He'd laughed and said, "Guess I'm not the baby anymore." James had filled it with wood glue and covered it with a red runner. I replied with one line, "I do not consent to this sale." Tracy's message came hours later short. Per the durable POA, consent is not required. Durable. That word stuck. They used to call me durable. When James was in the hospital, when Brian was starting out, when the business folded, when Sadie had surgery, everyone leaned and I stood. Now durable was just paperwork. The next week, the kitchen mail pile had been tidied, Brian's doing. In its place, a neat folder with labeled tabs, legalese, receipts, and final notices. At the bottom, I found a stamped envelope addressed to me unopened. Inside, a check labeled residual distribution and a sticky note. All proceeds from sale allocated. This covers your portion. It wasn't signed. The amount wouldn't have covered one semester of Sadie's school. I poured coffee and missed the mug. It splashed across the counter and dripped down the front of my apron. The same apron Sadie had once decorated with glitter paint and crooked letters, Glam Ma. Only the G remained now. The rest had washed away. I placed the check in the junk drawer next to expired coupons and a broken magnet from Yellowstone. Later, during a video call, Sadie popped on screen, holding a toy I hadn't seen in years. "Look, Mommy, it still smells like Grandma's house." Tracy's voice in the background. "We had to box up so much junk. That one's probably next." The screen froze. When it resumed, Sadie was gone. A realtor called next. Wrong number, maybe, or not. "I just want to confirm we're doing virtual staging this week for the beach property. We can blur out personal details in the photos. That photo wall's a little heavy emotionally." I didn't respond. He hung up without waiting. I opened the hall closet and pulled out the old wooden file box James had insisted we keep. Inside, birth certificates, house deeds, yellowing insurance slips. I found the deed to the beach cottage folded twice with a blue ribbon and our initials. Under it, a second envelope. James's handwriting on the flap. "In case they forget who you are." Inside, a small note card. "You built everything. Don't let them sell that too." I set the deed on this table, uncapped a red pen from the kitchen jar, and wrote across the top corner. Not large, not loud, just 3 words in tight print. "I'm not gone." Then I folded it shut, not for them, just so I wouldn't forget it either. I used to think silence meant being forgotten, but it turns out silence can be the one thing no one can take from you. I placed the ring on the glass table just to the right of the outlet Brian once pointed at with a frown. "This thing's a hazard," he muttered, not looking up. "Old wiring isn't safe for people your age." He didn't touch the outlet. He just kept moving furniture. The ring didn't make a sound when it hit the table. I noticed that. I packed slowly. Not out of indecision, but because I knew exactly what I wouldn't need. 1 black sweater, the one with the faded cuffs. 2 long-sleeve shirts. A tin of chamomile tea. The wedding photo wrapped in an old dish towel. One of Sadie's drawings crayons on cardstock, a crooked house with a sun in the corner. She'd written, "Hi, Grandma," at the top in orange block letters. I left the phone in its charging cradle. The screen had a smudge on it, a faint half circle, where my thumb used to rest when I'd scroll through old messages. I didn't wipe it clean. There was a printed copy of the power of attorney papers tucked between the manuals in the kitchen drawer. I tore it not down the middle, but edge by edge, long, uneven teeth that left nothing legible. The pieces went into the small trash bag. I tied it tightly and wrote "Return to sender" in block letters. No note, no name. I dropped it at the mailbox on the corner before they even noticed I'd moved. The fridge door still had the whiteboard. It was meant for shopping lists. Tracy used it once when she visited to write, "Don't eat the soft cheese, it's expired." She underlined "expired" twice. I found a dry marker and wrote beneath her old message, "Time to manage what you've claimed without having to see who it was taken from." I didn't expect anyone to read it right away, maybe not at all, but I wrote it anyway. The house had always been too quiet for them. Brian preferred hotels when he came to town. Tracy liked her scents, linen sprays, wax warmers, fabric softener sheets. She said, "Your house smells like wood." I told her the beams were original. She didn't laugh. I stood beneath the small security camera they had installed last year. "Just for your safety," Mom Brian said as he plugged it in. I nodded then. I didn't nod now. "Get this angle, Brian," I whispered to the lens. "I'm not coming back." There was no one at the door, no dog to chase the wheels of my bag, no neighbor glancing up from their garden, just the uneven hum of a distant lawnmower and the wind knocking once at the shutters. I walked to the bus stop on Harris Street. The sign was still bent, the letters half faded. I sat on the bench in my gray coat, the one with the coffee stain on the sleeve I never bothered to clean. I wore it on days James used to say, "You look sharp in that color." He never explained what he meant. No one texted. No one called. No missed alerts, no buzzing reminders. A man in a work van pulled into the driveway as I left. I'd seen his company logo before Realty Prep. He stepped out, clipboard in hand, looked at me as I passed. "You the housekeeper?" he asked, squinting. "I'm here for a final check on the plumbing." I didn't answer. He didn't wait. The bus came on time. I watched my reflection in the scratched glass. I didn't fix my hair. I didn't adjust my scarf. I just sat, and the bus pulled forward. Tracy once said, "We're trying to lighten your load." She meant the furniture. She'd already listed the dining table online. Vintage condition, sentimental value, the ad said. I used that table every night for 30 years. I never responded to the listing. I did, however, print it out and folded it in half. I left it in Brian's briefcase last week while he napped in the den. He never mentioned it. Neither did I. James's handwriting was on the deed to the beach house. His loops were careful, deliberate. He never signed anything without reading it twice. The copy I kept was stored in the back of a photo album. When I looked at it that morning, I saw a red line where I had once underlined our names. I traced over it again with a red pen. This time I wrote above it, "I'm still living." Not aloud, not for them, for me. Brian once told a neighbor, "She's not what she used to be. Gets turned around sometimes." He didn't know I was standing behind the screen door. He didn't see me step back. They don't know where I've gone. I doubt they'll ask for a while. They'll think I'm sulking. Or that I've left in protest. Maybe they'll call it a phase. Maybe they'll wait for me to apologize. But I didn't leave to make a point. I left because staying had become a performance they never watched. I left because my name was on papers they never let me read. I left because no one noticed the bruises on silence, or that I stopped using the second mug in the morning. The mug is still in the cupboard. It has a cracked top to bottom. James dropped it once and glued it back. He never bought another. It still holds coffee, he said. I didn't pack it. It belonged in the place I left behind. A woman at the bus stop looked over. She had headphones in a pink backpack with patches. She didn't smile. She didn't move away. She just sat like me, waiting. I adjusted my bag on my lap. It wasn't heavy. Most of what I carried inside. The driver didn't ask questions. I paid in cash. The window beside me rattled with each bump in the road. I didn't look back. Silence isn't what they think it is. It's not emptiness. It's not retreat. It's space that no longer answers to them. For the first time, it belongs to me. I never realized how quiet a room could be until I was the only one naming the silence. The place Lena found was small studio style, as they call it in listings, though no one used that word in person. The door simply had a paper tag, Unit 2, Ms. Cheryl. No last name, no title, just enough to mean I existed, not enough to define me. There was no foyer, just a step inside, and then the room began. A stove with a stubborn knob, a window that opened sideways instead of up, a chair that leaned if I wasn't careful. The first night I took everything out of the cloth bag and placed it on the counter in a lined tin of tea, 2 folded blouses, a spoon with a bent neck, and a picture of Sadie with a crooked paper star she once made for my birthday. She had drawn smiley faces on each of the 5 points. No one told me to unpack. No one asked when I'd be heading back. The soup was easy. I'd made it before squash onion, a bit of cream. But this time I added more pepper than usual. I didn't measure it. Just let the grinder turn 3 times. I sat with the bowl balanced on my lap and waited to see if I'd flinch. I didn't. No one reached over to push the bowl aside. No one said, "You're still making her eat like that." No one pinched their lips. At the market, I picked up a bunch of daisies in wax paper wrap. The cashier, a young man with a small crescent tattoo near his ear, scanned them slowly. Special occasion. I glanced at the tag stapled to the bouquet. Not really. He smiled. Treating yourself? I looked at the coin purse in my hand. Surviving myself. He nodded without looking up again. I placed the flowers in an old jam jar and set it on the table that came with the room. There were rings on the wood from previous tenants. I didn't cover them. The letter arrived Thursday. The envelope had no return address, but the seal was corporate standard windowed kind. Inside was a copy of a memo from Brian's office, likely forwarded by mistake. It used words like clinical disoriented and better suited for assisted environments. Near the end, underlined in faint blue, it read, "Time alone may further impair her clarity of thought." The paper was thick, slightly glossy. I folded it twice and set it on the stove burner. The gas hissed softly when I turned the dial. The flame caught quickly. I didn't flinch. No alarms went off. The ashes didn't scatter. They curled. The crossword I kept folded in my book was still waiting. Sadie always liked the ones with pictures. Let's find the words Grandma knows she used to say, circling the letters without much concern for the rules. Generous has too many letters, she once told me, crossing out half of it. I left it like that. I found it last night and traced her pencil marks. Then I folded it again and tucked it back where it belonged. There were sounds in the hallway sometimes. Other tenants, or the building's breath shifting in the walls. It didn't matter. No one knocked. I placed a small mirror on the wall near the sink. Not to check my hair, just to remember what I looked like when I wasn't reflected through someone else's gaze. Once during a holiday dinner, Tracy poured me a glass of water and said, "You should probably skip wine at your age." Brian didn't look up from his plate. I placed the mirror higher than eye level. The book I borrowed from the library was about stones. Geological formations, fossils, pressures over time. The first chapter was about quartz and fractures. It described how pressure doesn't always break, it realigns. I haven't turned the page yet. A voicemail came through Lena's phone the following morning. She held it out during our walk. "He says he's been trying to reach you," she whispered. The screen read unknown. 3 attempts. I looked at the sun across the sidewalk cracks and didn't take the phone. She didn't offer it again. A spoonful of sugar spilled on the counter this morning. I left it there until the ants found it. Then I wiped it with the edge of a napkin and threw the whole thing away. No one said I was careless. No one tutted behind me. I kept a notebook near the bed. I hadn't written in it yet, but I liked knowing it was there. One line had been penciled in from before. I didn't remember writing it. What happens when your name is still in the will but erased from the table? I didn't cross it out. The tea I brewed tonight was lavender. I let it steep longer than I should have. It turned dark and slightly bitter. I drank it anyway. On the windowsill, the orchid had begun to bloom again. One small petal cracked open, pale and reluctant. It leaned toward the light without urgency. No one had touched it but me. I turned off the light in the kitchenette and stood near the window. Outside, the street was quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't wait for your explanation. It just stays. I didn't feel small in that silence. I didn't need to correct how I sat or how I stirred. I didn't need to explain what the flowers were for. I didn't have to soften my voice to be heard or sharpen it to be remembered. I just was. And no one tried to edit that. I used to think absence might soften them. That space would bring back memory, not convenience. The envelope came without a sender, but the weight gave it away. Inside a glossy reprint of their wedding portrait, Brian in a tuxedo too tight in the shoulders, Tracy's hair lacquered into that stiff bridal swirl. They'd enlarged it for a reason. At the bottom, block letters said, "The Sanford family celebrates 10 years legacy. Unity, tradition. Not my name, not my face." But another woman stood at the center of the group photo. Pale blouse coral lipstick. Tracy's mother. The card beneath the photo was thick with an RSVP line that read, "Please indicate if mobility is limited to ensure appropriate seating." They didn't write Cheryl, they wrote "Dear Guest." I folded the invitation once, then again, then slid it beneath the lid of the old tin where I kept unused keys. Later, the phone buzzed. 1 ring. 2. I picked up, expecting silence. Brian's voice came clean and practiced. We sent the invite. Tracy thought it'd be good optics. Another pause. Also, there's a small packet of documents. Coastal parcel finalization. Just signatures. A few legal points, bank-related. Nothing for you to worry about. My fingers touched the chipped edge of a mug I hadn't thrown out. Lipstick from another time still faint on the rim. "If it's not too much," he continued. "Tracy says delays could confuse the press. You know how people talk." He didn't wait for my voice. I moved the tin slightly on the counter. It left behind a ring of dust, perfectly circular. "You need me to look like your mother when there's a camera," I said, not raising my voice. "But when I'm sitting with stale crackers and a light bulb that flickers, I'm just nobody." He didn't interrupt. That was new. Silence sometimes stings louder than insult. I listened to his breathing. Not rapid, just professional. He hung up without pleasantries. I didn't blame him. Performance doesn't need rehearsal when you've cut out the audience. The envelope of documents came 2 days later. A polite note attached in someone else's handwriting. Urgent. For signature. Kindly return at earliest convenience. Underneath the contract, they'd included a printed seating chart. My name wasn't on it. Instead, a small box read, "Reserved elder female relative, Tracy's side." I set the envelope next to a pair of dull scissors. I brewed a cup of barley tea. The steam coiled upwards without fuss. Later at the corner store, the cashier asked if I'd found everything. I nodded, placing a jar of honey and 3 envelopes on the counter. He pointed to the floral stamps I'd chosen. "Pretty old-fashioned," he said. "They hold," I replied. "Even after the glue goes stale." The only mail I sent that week was 1 envelope. Inside, half a photo carefully cut just. Brian eyes, stiff hand resting on empty space where Tracy used to be. No note, no explanation. Just that. I folded the scissors shut and put them back in the drawer where the wine opener used to be. I remembered a line from a sermon years ago. Something about names written in stone versus names written in air. I had been both. A voicemail came later that evening. Short. Not from Brian. Tracy's voice too sweet for sugar coated with something slippery. "We hope you're well. Of course you're invited. But if the walking's too much, we'll understand." She didn't say we love you. She didn't say you matter, just, "We'll understand." I took the envelope, the RSVP card, the seating plan, and fed each one into the shredder Lena had lent me. It hummed gently, like a throat clearing. I swept the paper curls into a jar, once used for dried lavender. Tucked it on a shelf. Not a grave. Just closure without a funeral. At the bottom of the closet, I found the ivory flats I wore the day they buried my mother. Comfortable, polite, never photographed. I placed them next to the donation bag. A message buzzed in from a cousin I hadn't seen in 5 years. "Heard you're not coming. Thought family came first." No question mark. Just an accusation delivered like weather. I didn't reply. I turned off the screen, then flipped it face down. By evening, I watered the new fern I'd bought, watching droplets roll off leaves like they were in no rush to be absorbed. On the kitchen counter, I laid the final copy of the deed. I uncapped a pen, hovered, recapped it. My fingers weren't shaking. They were just still. The scissors came out again. I took the second print of the wedding photo and sliced it where the hands met. I sealed 1/2 in a plain envelope. No stamp, no return address. The next morning, I walked it to the mailbox. No one saw me. No one needed to. Back home, I made toast. No butter. Just the crunch of plain bread. The knife lay untouched beside the plate. I didn't turn on the radio. I let the hum of the refrigerator fill the space. By the window, a ceramic bird leaned slightly chipped at the wing. It had been Tracy's once. She'd left it behind after one of those brunches where everyone laughed at nothing. I turned it to face outward. Sometimes absence is the only way to be visible. Some things stop needing explanation once you stop asking to be seen. I turn the knob on the radio until it lands on something without lyrics, just strings. Bach, maybe. I don't check. The teacup has a small chip at the rim, a bite taken out of porcelain. I drink from that side now. The skirt I wear is soft brown, the one Tracy once called dust-colored dignity. It hangs just below my knee and has a pocket deep enough for my apartment key and one folded grocery receipt. At the library, I shelve books alphabetically, even when no one's watching. 2 mornings a week, I run the children's corner. Sadie comes with a woman I don't know. She wears Velcro shoes and never speaks during story time. But once she left a red plastic ring on the windowsill. I kept it. Eleanor stops by with her green sweater and the same question she always asks. "Your husband gone long?" 5 years. She wrinkles her nose. "But that son of yours, he's still alive, right?" I brush a speck of lint from my sleeve. Not in ways that count. The tea bag string drapes over the side of the cup like a tired arm. I let it steep longer than needed. I used to count the seconds back when someone else cared how things tasted. Now the bitterness stays. It suits me. I get a text that night from Tracy. We misunderstood each other. Brian wants to explain. Sadie keeps asking. I stare at the screen until it dims. Then I type. Sadie is welcome anytime. Brian is not. No dots appear. No typing bubble. Just silence where noise used to be. That same week, I walk into the bank with my old coat buttoned wrong. I don't fix it. The teller's smile flickers when I hand over the documents. I open a trust account under Sadie Keller Fund. No joint access, no trustee, just me. The banker adjusts his tie. No guardian listed, no. He hesitates. Any contact, in case of no. He stamps the paper. I fold it and slide it into the side compartment of my purse, the one where I used to keep breath mints for Brian. I leave the bank without looking back. That evening, I sit with Sadie on the floor of my living room. She colors a giraffe with blue stripes. Why don't you visit our house? Because your house isn't mine. She switches crayons. Did you break it? I didn't build it. She frowns. Mommy says you made things hard. I run my finger along the edge of the paper. Sometimes not agreeing makes you invisible. She doesn't ask what I mean. Her drawing has no background, just floating animals and a sun in the corner. The next day, I change my banking password to my maiden name, Keller. No numbers, no dates, just the name that came before they gave me theirs. I delete Brian's linked access. The app warns me it may cause disruption. I press continue. Eleanor knocks again while I'm making toast. You get that settlement yet? It's not a settlement. Same thing. You're entitled. I spread the jam to the edge of the bread. I'm not collecting damages. I'm planting distance. She squints. That a poem? No. She shrugs and walks off. Her shoes leave bits of gravel on my doormat. Tracy sends another message. Brian says you're being irrational. Sadie doesn't deserve this. I reply, Sadie will be protected. That's more than I can say for what I gave you both. Nothing comes back. Not even a punctuation mark. At the next library session, Sadie waits until the other kids leave. She points to a sticker book. Mom said you used to get tired. I still do. But you don't say. Not everything worth knowing is said. She places the sticker on her forehead and grins. Can I stay longer next time? You can stay as long as you like. Later, when she picks up her things, she whispers, I like it when it's quiet. So do I. That night, I find an old receipt from a bakery in Oceanside dated 2 years ago. Brian once told me I ordered like someone without taste buds. I look at the listed items, black coffee-seeded toast, no butter. I fold the slip and slide it into the spine of a dictionary on my shelf. I receive one more message. You're making this hard. Brian can't explain if you won't meet. He had years to explain. He chose inheritance over honesty. There's no reply. I do not delete the conversation. I move it into a folder titled Unsent. The kettle whistles the next morning louder than I remember. I turn off the stove and leave the water hot, but untouched. I choose instead to wear the faded cardigan with loose threads at the sleeves. Brian once said it made me look like I'd given up. I adjust the buttons and smooth the collar. I place Sadie's drawing in a new frame. I use the red plastic ring to hang my keys. Before bed, I read 3 pages from a gardening guide I picked up from the discount bin. One sentence stays with me. Some plants bloom only when ignored. I dog-ear the page and set it on the nightstand. I turn off the light. And I no longer wait for permission to take up space. They used to say I had a calm voice. Not soft, just quiet in a way that made people lower their own. I never understood what they meant until recently, standing in a room where silence finally belonged to me. I brought 3 things to the law office that morning: a manila envelope, the deed to the coastal property, and a letter written in blue ink on thick cream paper. My handwriting has changed since college, smaller now, more deliberate. Let's keep this short. I handed it over without waiting for small talk. The receptionist blinked at the weight of the words sealed inside. I relinquish all inheritance tied to Brian Sanford's estate. I decline all representative roles. I revoke permission for my name, voice, or likeness to appear in any promotional or financial campaigns. Any future attempts at contact will be considered harassment under California law. That's what the letter said. There was no PS. No one came after me when I left. No one had to. At the county records building, I ticked boxes with a pen I'd brought from home, one with a bite mark at the cap. Legal name change request from Cheryl Sanford back to Cheryl Monroe. Reason, personal autonomy. You know this means new IDs, new accounts, new everything. The clerk looked younger than Sadie. I know who I am. The phrase surprised me. It didn't feel like defiance. It felt like brushing dust off a mirror. I called Hugo later that afternoon. He used to manage our rental units before Tracy took them over. I'm sending you the keys. Do whatever you want with the house. Sell it. Let it rot. Donate the furniture. It's not my story anymore. He hesitated. You sure, Cheryl? I was sure before I even dialed your number. I sealed the house key inside a plain envelope and used a return address I made up on the spot. I didn't want them sending anything back. Some places are better left unopened. There was only one thing I kept: Lena's bracelet. A small, handmade thing with letter beads and one chipped blue stone. She'd given it to me when she was 5, convinced it would protect me from sad dreams. I wore it that day, hidden under my sleeve like a vow made to someone who hadn't stopped looking up at me yet. The final act came quietly. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of chamomile and wrote a letter to Lena. Just 2 pages. No stories, no advice. Only one sentence mattered. You are the reason I didn't choose silence entirely. I boxed it with the bracelet and a notebook blank, except for the first line, write the names that won't be erased. I didn't sign it with Love, Grandma. Just Cheryl. She deserved the woman I had chosen to become, not the one who'd been erased on paper for convenience. The next morning, I went to drop the parcel off. The mail clerk asked if I wanted tracking. No, it'll find her. Back in my building, I rode the elevator without pressing the button. It stopped at the top floor anyway. The light above me flickered once, then steadied. In my hand was a single sheet, the official certificate of name restoration. I folded it twice and slipped it into my coat. The elevator doors opened. Cheryl Monroe stepped out. The other woman didn't follow. I thought about the first time Brian brought me to that house. He pointed out the crown molding like it meant something. Back then, I nodded as if the trim could hold a marriage together. There had been a coat rack by the door. I used to hang my scarves on it always neatly, even when no one else did. On the morning I packed, I noticed the rack had been replaced with a digital assistant that blinked when spoken to. I never asked it a thing. A week before I walked into the law office, Tracy sent a voice message I didn't open. I could hear the first 2 seconds in the preview, her voice already raised, already tired. You think you can just... It began. I deleted it. I kept the voicemail from Lena, though. Not because it said anything important, just because she giggled at the end, a sound that didn't owe itself to any adult. That kind of laugh has a half-life longer than memory. The envelope I used for the legal notice had a faint coffee stain in the corner. I hadn't noticed until I was already in the building. I left it anyway. Seemed fitting. On my way out of the records office, a man held the door open for me and looked at the paper in my hand. Congratulations, he said, unsure. I nodded. It's a birth certificate of sorts. In my building's lobby, the doorman looked confused. Mr. Sanford. I raised a hand just slightly. Not anymore. I walked past the mailboxes. My name had already been removed, just an empty slot waiting for the right person to arrive. The apartment smelled like lemon polish. I'd cleaned before leaving that morning. Maybe it was habit, maybe ritual. The bracelet rested beside my teacup, now beside a folded piece of stationery I didn't send. I had written a note to myself the night before, one line repeated twice. The door doesn't need to slam to close. At 7:00 p.m., I lit one candle. Not for ceremony, just for light. No one called that night. The silence didn't ask for company. I poured the rest of the tea and sat with the name mine again, not spoken aloud, just thought, steady and whole. In the morning, I didn't rush. There was no need. I folded the blanket at the foot of the bed, placed the bracelet back into the drawer, and stared at the chipped mug I'd used for years. It had a crack near the rim I never drank from. A delivery slip had been pushed under the door, an ad for luxury remodeling services. I tore it in half without reading. Let them build over their own footprints. Before noon, I opened the drawer one last time, then shut it gently. The handle didn't click. Some things close softer than expected. Not every ending needs a witness. This one had me. Some names disappear faster than others, especially when no one bothers to use them right. I poured hot water over the chamomile. The steam curled around my wrist before fading into nothing. No meetings, no waiting room visits, no calendars filled by someone else's assistant. The cup had a slight crack near the base, barely visible, but it hadn't leaked. I kept it anyway. On the counter, a square yellow sticky note bent slightly at the edge. In purple crayon, "See you after school. Don't forget my drawing, Grandma Sadie." The drawing was folded in my bag, exactly where she'd handed it to me the day before. I hadn't moved it. I hadn't needed to. I opened the sliding door with my forearm and stepped out barefoot. The orchids had tilted overnight. I turned the pot, realigned the stems. Beside the largest one, I placed a small clay sculpture, a woman holding a broken branch. One arm curved upward as if steadying it. The crack had been sealed, but the bloom had grown from the break. I didn't make it. Someone at the market had offered it for $5 and a story. I only took the statue. At the library, no one looked up when I joined the reading group. The woman next to me had brought lemon drops and a small fan. It squeaked every few seconds. A man with thick glasses asked if anyone had finished the last chapter. I hadn't. No one seemed to mind. The moderator forgot my name, called me the lady with the scarf. I nodded. That was fine. Midway through the hour, someone unfamiliar walked in. Late 40s, purse still on her shoulder heels, louder than the clock. She scanned the room, then paused too long. I could feel it before she spoke. "Excuse me, weren't you Cheryl Sanford? That name was in the papers last year. Something about a trust fund lawsuit." I think I turned the page of my book before looking up. "No, I'm Cheryl Monroe. That other person doesn't live here anymore." She blinked, hesitated, then sat 2 chairs away. No one followed up. No one asked for context. The squeaky fan clicked on. I stayed until the end. No rush. On the way out, I folded the flyer about next week's discussion on memoirs, then tossed it into the recycling bin before reaching the exit. The elevator in my building paused halfway, as it always did. I leaned back, holding the grocery bag with one arm. The bell dinged twice. At home, I placed the new tin of tea beside the old one. The difference was in the scent. One carried a citrus trace. I didn't need labels. The picture of James was no longer framed. Just the photograph, now edges softened by time, tucked near the window, where the sun hit at an angle only for a few minutes each morning. His tie was crooked in the image. I never corrected it. I no longer corrected anything. A woman from the tenants' committee had dropped by earlier. She left a pamphlet for community gardening and a handwritten note. "You seem calm. We need more of that here." I folded the pamphlet twice, set it under the mug with the cracked base. Lena had sent no reply to the parcel. I didn't expect one. Inside the package was my old notebook and a single line just beneath the cover. "You are the reason I didn't choose silence entirely." That was all. I didn't explain what that meant. I didn't need her to understand it immediately, perhaps not ever. I dusted the bookshelf, wiped the fingerprints from the window pane, and adjusted the curtain to let the light fall just past the edge of the table. From the hallway, I heard a faint knock. It was the boy from upstairs delivering Sadie's painting. "She forgot it," he said, holding it out. "Kids do that," I replied. He shrugged, handed it to me, and walked away without waiting for anything else. On the paper, 2 stick figures. One held a star. The other stood underneath it, arms open. There was no label for who was who. I didn't need one. I clipped it to the fridge using a magnet shaped like a sun. Later, I washed the teacup again, even though it was clean. A small chip near the rim caught my nail. I turned it so it faced the wall when I set it down. The voicemail icon on the landline blinked once. A leftover from the cable bundle. I pressed delete without listening. The sunlight dimmed gently. Not suddenly, not dramatically. I folded the cloth napkin in thirds and laid it over the arm of the chair. The corners matched. There had been moments, years of them, where I thought survival meant staying inside a role, repeating a name, answering on cue. But names do not carry breath. People do. Outside a car honked twice. Not for me. I touched the rim of the teacup again, then let go. I had no calendar to turn, no dinner to prepare, no guest list to adjust. Just the quiet act of being here in a place that didn't demand proof of belonging. I used to think rebirth required some blaze, some declaration. But today I didn't rise from ashes. I just stood still and it was enough. No medals, no articles, no title cards. Just the whisper of a woman folding time into her scarf, placing one photograph down, and watching the light decide where to land. I am not forgiven. I am not honored. I am alive. Not for anyone. Not against anyone, just for me. Because I am still here.